Welcome to the National Women's Fitness Academy podcast. We're here to talk about women's health, female hormones, body image, and all things health and fitness. Hi ladies, Lauren Calvin here, back for a special podcast all about PCOS. We are talking with naturopath Claire Hargreaves today. Really excited for this one. Lots of gold nuggets of information. Enjoy. All right, welcome. It's so glad to finally chat to you. We've been trying to do this for a while. I think I had COVID first, and then you had a wedding, and then you got COVID, and so I've been wanting to chat to you for ages because you just seem like a really passionate woman about women's health. So before I keep babbling on, I'd like to introduce you all to Claire Hargreaves. Is that how I pronounce it? So Claire is a naturopath, and I'll get you to introduce yourself and just tell everyone a little bit about yourself and what you've been up to and what you do.
Yeah, cool. Thank you so much for having me. It's such a pleasure. And gosh, my background, it's been very colourful, but I guess what led me into naturopathy and wanting to study it and be in this world was just really experiencing my own health issues. And I think that's what gets a lot of us into this space. It's going through the motions with something that, we get health disturbance and we want to figure out what's going on. So I saw a naturopath, which was amazing. And completely revitalized me in terms of my digestion, and I had really chronic sinusitis. But I guess like me as a person, I've always been such a doer, and I've had like just a really competitive background. Like I grew up with 3 brothers, and then I was in the CrossFit world and ran businesses, did lots of stuff. And I really ran into some menstrual struggles at the kind of end of my, toward the end of my 30s. So when I came into actually getting into clinic with naturopathy, I'd never really thought about doing like women's health specifically. Love women, but it wasn't really my forte. But I just had this affinity for females coming through that or experiencing a lot of menstrual issues. And it's just fascinating. It's seriously, everyone that comes through, they could have a very similar diagnosis, but their presentation is entirely different. Like we're all so unique. And yeah, I just find it so fascinating. And in that kind of area and being in clinic as a student practitioner, I was able to work with a lot of women on menstrual issues and see how much of an affinity herbs have for this space, and just how we can move women through their health struggles in more natural ways, and they don't have to go down the medical route, and they don't have to be so confused about what's going on within their body. So yeah, I'm so fascinated by health, and have such a curiosity for the human body, what goes on biochemically, but also like the undercurrent, like the energetics. And being females especially, like we have these emotional bodies, we're really energetic as people. So I love that side of things as well. Like what's the undercurrent of that issue that's presenting, and how can we weave that in? That's kind of like my background in yoga and in energy medicine. So yeah, I try and fuse all the worlds together when I have a client sitting in front of me, and try and get the best outcomes for that person. So I guess that's kind of like me in a nutshell.
Yeah, no, that's awesome, because so often women go to their GP and the underlying issues aren't even looked at. We're just handed the contraceptive pill or like a IUD or something like that just to mask the symptoms, and they don't have the time or the care to look at those underlying conditions. And that's why naturopathy is so important in women's health, because our bodies respond so much to our nutrition, our environment, and our gut health and everything like that. It's just, it's just a no-brainer really when you're looking at women's health to go the naturopathy route. So like in terms of what you do, what's the most common thing that you help women with?
So I've actually been doing a lot of menstrual dysregularity in terms of what's preventing fertility. Endometriosis has come up quite a bit, PCOS, and we'll go into how enigmatic PCOS is shortly, because it's like it could be a million things and it could be one thing. So it's very, very multifaceted. But yeah, just stress, women living really stressful lives, and the kind of the how that kicks things off in the body. That's that's a lot of what I've been doing over the last few months, and a lot of digestive disturbance, which is kind of running into the infertility, the menstrual dysregulation, all of this stuff. Like, it's so intertwined. It's just fascinating. And I think that's like the biggest thing with naturopathy, and what I love to do is really try and pull away from the diagnosis. Like, people will come in and say, oh, I've got PCOS, and it's like, okay, cool, but how did that get diagnosed? What are your symptoms? What do you like? What's your experience? What's your health story? Because PCOS is so many things, and I think the individual health story is just it's at the crux of everything. Like, you have to get in there to understand and be able to bring someone from where they are to someplace better. So I work all online. Nice. I get to hang out at home all day.
So good. Yes, working from home is good. Has its good and negatives as well. But so you're like pretty booked out though. Like, you're a busy woman, so it must be a high demand job. Like, there's so many women out there needing your help, and obviously what you do is working, because they're spreading the word and you're getting more and more clients. So it must be very fulfilling to be able to help those women.
Absolutely. And I think a lot of it is just being heard. It's really just getting to a point where you've just run up against so many barriers and boundaries, and you just don't feel heard as a woman. And I think that's the most beautiful thing, is a lot of people just walk away and they're like, oh, I just feel you understand me. It's like, because you showed me who you are, and you showed me what you've experienced. So
absolutely. So I wanted to chat about PCOS, because it is such a complex, I guess, hormonal disorder, or however you want to call it. It's so complex, and there's so many different parts to it, and different types and things like that, and symptoms. I guess it's good to just have a chat about it, and I guess debunk anything that maybe you've heard, or so in your terms, what is PCOS?
You've given me one with so many moving parts.
I know. What the bloody hell is it?
It is totally enigmatic. Like, that's the best way to describe it. It's very complex. It's got moving parts from both endocrine and menstrual worlds. And it's really it's not about the ovaries. And I guess if we want to start debunking from the beginning, let's talk about the difference between PCO and PCOS, because polycystic ovaries are actually really common. So any female in the world could have an ultrasound and have a look at their ovaries, and 20% of them will have lots of follicles. So they can be seen as someone who, they could have normal cycles and everything's regular, but then they're told that they have PCOS. For instance, they might have gone in and had an ultrasound to check out if endo's there, or something else unrelated, and then they've seen that there's follicles on the ovaries, and all of a sudden this person has PCOS. Which isn't the case. So PCOS is, it's a plethora of issues. And if we look at the Rotterdam criteria, so the Rotterdam criteria is how we diagnose PCOS. And that is looking at anovulation. So you have to have two of these three to be able to be diagnosed. So one is anovulation or oligomenorrhea. So basically, you're not having any cycle at all, or if you are, very infrequent. So less than 8 periods a year, and it's long cycles, 35, 40, 45, 50 days. You're kind of in limbo, like, am I going to have a cycle? So that's one. Two is hyperandrogenism. So that's having extra androgens in the body. So testosterone, DHEA, DHT, those kinds. And this can result in hirsutism, which is like the excess hair growth. It can be like the hormonal acne, deepening of the voice, those kinds of presentations. And then the third one is the polycystic ovaries. So you could have anovulation and hyperandrogenism and not have polycystic ovaries. You're just not ovulating, and there could be other reasons why that's happening. But I think that's a really important piece, because when we think about PCOS, and I've had actually one of my first clients in student clinic came in and she's like, I have PCOS and I'm infertile. I was told I was infertile, and she was 20 years old. That's heartbreaking to hear that. And she actually fell pregnant in the first month of us working together, but she didn't want to fall pregnant. She wasn't.
Whoops.
It was a huge whoopsie, and she's had a daughter now. Amazing. But it's like, it's it's a pretty big blanket statement to put on people that have cysts in our ovaries, which aren't actually, they're just our follicles, and the follicles are filled with fluid and they look like a cyst. So it's also, so PCO versus PCOS. PCOS is kind of symptoms, and PCO is just your ovary with a few extra follicles in there, which can happen could happen randomly any month.
So it's a highly over diagnosed thing then, like it's a woman would go into a GP. Can a GP actually diagnose it, or do they have to go to a specialist?
GPs can diagnose it, and they can do it from the tests that come back if they take them to get an androgen profile, and the ultrasound, and then obviously just not having a period is the other one. But I feel like it's both overdiagnosed and undiagnosed. I think it's like two birds of a fish. There's like such a big spectrum. It's overdiagnosed in the sense that you can go even just going to a doctor sometimes and saying, oh, I've just come off the pill and it's been 4 months that I haven't got my period yet, and they're like, oh yeah, you have PCOS. It's like, no. So that's like the overdiagnosed side. The underdiagnosed side is women who get to the point where they're a little bit older, maybe like 30, 32, 35, and they want to fall pregnant and they can't do it, and then they realize, oh, I have all of these issues around within the PCOS realm. So they've gone a really long time maybe experiencing some of these systems unbeknown that it's actually part of this syndrome. So I think there's a very wide spectrum.
Absolutely. It's crazy. So if someone came to you and you suspect PCOS, like what would that typically look like in their symptoms, and what would you do?
So they would generally have like the irregularity in the periods, like really long periods is kind of my first point of call. And then if they have pain with ovulation, that can sometimes be like a symptom. The acne, which is really, really common, especially for women coming off the pill, and that's like the post-pill PCOS that we see, which is just an androgen rebound. That's just your body trying to reestablish the communication from your brain to your ovaries. There's obviously a obesity side, so there's like an insulin resistant kind of side with PCOS, and I'll go into what happens in the body so we can understand that a little bit more. But it's really tricky because there could be a lean, seemingly healthy woman come and sit in front of me, and then there could be someone who is really struggling to lose weight, and their weight is just creeping up and up and up, and they're having all of these issues, and both of them have irregular cycles, but they're so different. So it comes back to the symptoms, and depending on what I do will always be in relation to that. But how about we go into also it's like the fertility side as well. Like fertility is a big, if people come in and they're struggling to fall pregnant, or they're having recurrent miscarriage, then those can be warning signs too. But without having kind of the androgen profile, looking at insulin, seeing what insulin's up to, blood sugar levels, and doing a ultrasound, it's really tricky to diagnose. I usually don't go down the path of the diagnosis. I just start treating the symptoms and treating the symptoms, but finding the root cause of the symptoms to treat at that underlying level, and things just naturally fall into place. So kind of use the symptoms as a guide, and then there are kind of benchmark toward someone getting into a healthier state. So there's also a mood component as well, like because the hormones are jumping around everywhere and they're not in sync and not kind of moving in a cyclical manner, we can get like irritability and tension and depression. We're not getting the beautiful second phase of our menstrual cycle, where we're getting our pregnenolone, which is a really potent like feel good hormone for our brain. So we're not getting any of that really lovely, nourishing like hug at the end of our cycle, which that kind of leads to the mood stuff. So many symptoms. It's usually not me thinking, oh, this person has PCOS. It's just like, wow, this person's presenting with all this stuff, and I'm going to get to the root cause of what's causing this. And there's sometimes the PCOS. A lot of the time, someone will come to me with a PCOS diagnosis from a doctor. So that's kind of,
and then you work back from there.
But I don't usually try and go seeking it, because I do think that when you put yourself in that band camp of I have PCOS, it's like not a death sentence, but it's like you get really attached to it, and all of a sudden there's not a lot of wiggle room, and you think that it's something that you have for life, and I don't know if that's the case. So so let's go. Do you want to go into what goes on in the body, because I feel like
Please.
It's very fascinating.
Please, I would love to hear all about it, because as much as I have sort of learned and listened to lectures, it kind of is so complex, but it's so interesting. You have to sort of listen to it over and over and get lots of different perspectives for it to really, like, I guess, sink in, for me anyway. So I'd love to hear all about it.
Yeah, cool. So it depends, again, like what's presenting as to what's going on in the body. But let's start with the ovaries. So in a normal menstrual cycle, our brain talks to our pituitary and tells it, hey, let's produce gonadotrophic releasing hormone, which is something that travels down to our ovaries, and then our ovaries, it goes to our pituitary, and then our pituitary releases FSH and luteinizing hormone. These travel down to initiate folliculogenesis. So basically in our ovary, we have all these primordial follicles that are just hanging out waiting to develop. And these two hormones, FSH and LH, go down and wake them up. And they wake up, 6 to 12 in a regular female, wake them up and they start to develop. So in this way, they become a primary follicle, and they're developing to a point where there's going to be a chosen one. So there's a ton, and they're like, I'm developing, like I want to be picked. And then that's like the first kind of week of our cycle. From that, like between then and ovulation, there's like a chosen one. It gets chosen to develop further. It's like, you're the one. And then that one finalizes its development. So it goes through all the stages of, inside that follicle is our oocyte. So that's, the egg is inside there. That's going to become a baby, like we need to let that sink in. It's going to be a human.
Yeah.
Time it's going to become a human. So this follicle it's so important, and it nourishes and ensures that the oocyte develops to the point where it can be spat out at ovulation. So the little follicle will go to the side of the ovary, and then off you go out into the fallopian tube and hang out, and let's see if you get fertilized, and then if it's a really good egg and it gets fertilized and it goes into the uterus and implants, and voila, we have a baby, right? So during that stage, it's like gets to the point where the egg gets spat out, and then the sac that it lived in becomes the corpus luteum. So this is now like an endocrine secreting gland, and it basically, the cells in there start secreting extra amounts of progesterone. So progesterone is what develops our uterine lining. It makes it really nourishing. It's going to be the safe haven where our baby lives. So that's also really important. All the other kind of primary follicles that were like, pick me, and didn't get chosen, they just disintegrate. And then obviously if there's no implantation, the cycle starts again. So when we look at PCOS, it starts up here. I mean, there's lots of things that can go on, but it can start up here where gonadotropin releasing hormone is getting pulsed more frequently. So in a normal cycle, it's usually every 90 minutes that it will get pulsed. Whereas in someone with PCOS, we're seeing that that's getting pulsed every hour. So it's telling the pituitary to release more LH. So then LH is getting released more. And in that way, LH then increases, and there's a kind of decrease in FSH. So now we have this real like relativity between LH and FSH, which in a sense is one of the ways that things get out of balance, right? Already we've got something, and that's just at the head. That's just the brain.
Yeah.
So then when we get down to ovulation, so when we're looking at that secondary follicle, the chosen one that's now developing our oocyte, which is going to be our baby, we have two kinds of cells in there. One are theca cells, and then one are granulosa cells. And the theca cells are the ones that produce androgen. They produce our androgen. And what happens is LH stimulates that cell.
Okay.
And it stimulates the theca cell. Let's produce androgens, basically. What happens outside the body when there's other things going on, whether there's stress or insulin resistance or other stuff going on out here, we can have insulin come and act on this cell as well. So theca is getting stimulated both ways, from both extra LH and potentially extra insulin. Yeah. So there's extra insulin happening. There's extra androgens happening here.
Yeah. So that's where the extra androgens come from. Yeah.
Yeah, in one sense, that's where they can come from. And the granulosa cells are ideally making our estrogen, but it's not really until we get to the point of ovulation that starts to really drive up, and that the granulosa cells in our corpus luteum can start to make our progesterone. So if we don't get to ovulation, that isn't happening.
Mm-hmm.
So there's like decreases in our estrogen and our progesterone there, and the androgens just keep going. They're just they're just thriving, you know?
Yeah.
So basically the brain is telling our ovaries to make lots of extra follicles.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
LH, like, it creates more follicles, more than, so we usually have about 6 to 12 that are going to be primary to become that chosen one. The LH goes down, it's like, let's go, like, make all of them. Like more than 12, or that the follicles can get more fluid filled, so they can get bigger. So that's when you can have, you know, the oversized ovary and things are like starting to swell. There's pain. That's it's just like this over secretion and over potential of everything that's going on in there. Then obviously if we don't ovulate, there's no corpus luteum, so there's no estrogen, and we're just kind of hanging out in this limbo land.
Yeah.
Like, are we going to ovulate? Like, are we going to get our period? Like, when's everything going to start again? And it's really horrible. It's a really horrible place to be for women that get that. I know for me, there's only really been one time where I've skipped a lot of periods. It was when I was traveling, and I don't know if it was because it was I wasn't feeling grounded or settled, but yeah, it was like 7 months without a period, which was pretty radical. Like, it's a weird place to be. Like, traveling around with all these tampons, all these like organic tampons ready to have a period. Why am I carrying these around with me? But yeah, it was really fascinating. That was like one of my times where I'm like, my body must think it's not time to produce a baby.
Yeah.
Because that's what stress can do to the brain. Yeah. Like, it almost puts you into this state of, I don't feel safe. We're not ready to conceive. So if that's kind of like the underlying ideal, then there's going to be issues with ovulation. Yeah.
Stress definitely is such a big part in it, isn't it?
Huge. So so that's the ovaries, and then we have peripheral tissues that are also making androgens. So when we have extra adipose tissue, so if we are overweight for whatever reason, whatever's led us to that, then we are going to produce more testosterone from there. Like, we have elevated androgens. It also aggravates kind of our insulin resistance as well. So that feeds back to that theca cell, and it like presses on.
Because I know the fat cells produce more estrogen, but so how do they increase the androgens as well?
So the adrenal gland is producing DHEA and androstenedione, and they can activate testosterone and DHT, which influences adipose tissue release of testosterone as well. So it's like this full bidirectional, it's so complex. It's so complex.
And is that if you have too many fat cells, or you're like, because everyone's sort of healthy at different fat percentages. So it's like, is there a range, or is it completely different for everyone? Like a range of body fat?
Absolutely. I think it's different for everyone. And I also think that insulin resistance plays a really huge role in it. Yeah. So, we'll come to ways that we can support that and when we get to the part where we talk about how we help.
Yes.
The insulin resistance side is a huge part of it. There is also, fat tissue can increase the estrogen, so that will then you get unopposed estrogen in the body, which does all sorts of fun things as well. But when we have that increase in insulin, that is going to decrease our sex hormone binding globulin. Yeah. So our sex hormone binding globulin is like basically the bus that carries our hormones around our body. So when our hormones are inside the bus, they're not going to be going and knocking on anyone's door. They're like driving around, and they're bound. Yeah. So when we have decreases in sex hormone binding globulin, then we don't have as many buses to carry our hormones, and they're free to roam around in our bloodstream. So that's when we get increases in free testosterone, and that is what kind of goes around and does its thing. So yeah, it's a lot. It's such a lot to wrap your head around when you're looking at it.
Yeah, every time it's like, whoa, mind blown. It's
Yeah.
so
And then it's like,
fascinating.
absolutely. And then, you know, with the adrenal glands, they, if you have increased cortisol because there's like a stress component, then that's going to decrease your insulin. So when your insulin's decreased, it means that there's going to be more blood sugar, like sugar in the blood, like roaming around unbound. So that has all kinds of like inflammatory effects. And there's always going to be kind of a reactive kind of hypoglycemia after basically the pancreas figures out what's going on. It's like, hang on a moment.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's just this, it's a very like dyscyclical syndrome in all manners. I feel like it's like the hormone cycle gets messed up, the insulin cycle gets messed up, the cortisol cycle gets messed up. Like there's just, everything's just dysregulated. It's like we need to get this communication happening again. And there are so many axes in the body. You know, there's the hypothalamus, pituitary, adrenal. So that's our brain talking to our adrenal glands. And then we have the hypothalamus talking to the pituitary, talking to the ovaries. So that's like another axis. And then these two axes communicate as well. So it's just like all these communication pathways in the body. Yeah, pretty crazy.
And if the body's not balanced and if you're not in alignment somewhere, then it's all out of whack, and that's when you get all those symptoms of just irregular everything, which is not good. With some of the literature and things that I've read there that says that there's 4 types of PCOS. Is that like I guess, is that how you see it, or is that fact, or is that more like 4 different like types of symptoms or something like?
I think it kind of like it's a nice way to summarize all of that mumbo jumbo I just vomited at you. So yeah, they say there's 4 types. Like there's the insulin resistant, there's inflammatory, there's post-pill, and adrenal. Is that kind of what you've read as well?
Yes. Yeah.
And I think, you know, the insulin resistant side is insulin impairing the ovaries, and it's also telling the increasing the production of the testosterone and LH. And then the inflammatory side is a bit more digestive. So there can actually be quite a digestive component here. And especially as it relates to the gut's immune system. Because if we've got digestive disturbance and there's some stuff going on in there, then the immune system is quite closely regulated in terms of our gut health. So if there's immune dysregulation, that's going to influence our inflammation. So that's kind of like all intertwined there. Post-pill is that androgen rebound. So we go through a bit of a stage when we come off the pill where everything's coming back online, because the pill cuts off that communication between the brain to the ovaries. So there's like a kind of a temporary surge in androgens as everything's like figuring itself out again, and depending on the environment that we're in and our stresses or whatever, depend on where we can kind of groove off the pill, which I think is a struggle for a lot of women, right? Like a lot of women get put on the pill for PCOS as well, and it's, how do I come off and not get that rebound of acne and the cycles and feeling shit and weight gain and bloating and all the things that come with it. But it's just raising awareness that there's so much more we can do.
Absolutely. And in terms of doing bloods and things like that, what tests would you do, or would you recommend someone go and get?
So I love seeing LH to FSH, and we want to see those guys at like 1:1 when they come through. That's like kind of day 2, 3 of the cycle. But what you'll see in PCOS is that LH is kind of double that of FSH. So that's a pretty clear sign that something's going on in the ovaries. It's like, well, they're LH, right? So we know what that does. I've kind of explained that with the theca cells and stuff. So it's like, all right, well, there's going to be some kind of irregularity, whether that's PCOS or whether that's just improper communication of the brain to the ovaries. We can tell with symptoms. But the fasting insulin and blood sugar are huge, because that will show that that insulin resistant pattern. And an androgen profile. So having a look at testosterone as well as free testosterone. So what can happen is we can look at the free testosterone in the body and it's quite low, but we want to see the total testosterone and see what's actually in the body. Having a look at DHEAS, which is kind of the proponent before testosterone. That's related to the adrenal glands. And then also if we're looking at like kind of an inflammatory profile, and this will be with more the overweights the ones that are gaining weight or really stuck with their weight, is the C-reactive protein. So that can show inflammation in the body as well.
Yeah. Wow. There's so much you can look at in the blood. And yeah, that's really cool.
Absolutely.
And so if someone sort of come to you as a client, you could give them, I guess, the referral to go to get their blood test, and then they'd come back to you, and then you interpret those to them and sort of come up with a plan from there. And I guess, would you also recommend getting to get the ultrasound as well, so you can get all the data to make sure that you're getting the right diagnosis, or would you just continue treating the symptoms?
I just dive straight in and figure out the root cause. And I'll share a lot of kind of what I do with people. Your listeners can go off and trial if, you know, there's those that are listening with PCOS, because there's so much we can do outside of intervening with herbs and supplements even, you know. Cool. So many ways we can shift things. But yeah, ideally, if someone is really, really experiencing a disarray of health, and there's a plethora of symptoms going on, and I think that it will be really useful for them to have a diagnosis, like it's something that will serve them, then I will go down that path. But otherwise, I just try and keep everyone's eyes on the road of just moving towards health rather than being stuck in a disease state, if that makes sense. Yeah,
that's a good way, a nice way to go as well. So it's like, stop focusing so much on the illness and focus more on the wellness and getting your symptoms better. So yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, absolutely. So ideally, if there is ovarian stuff going on, so the LH to FSH is a bit out of whack, you want to really get that communication from the brain to the ovaries happening really well, which can be done with a lot of herbs. But like we know, stress kind of impinges on that. So a lot of lifestyle stuff supports that. You just you really want to figure out if they're not ovulating and they don't have a cycle, why is that happening? There's always a reason. And I think the menstrual cycle, especially if we see anything there, that's like end state disruption. Like our body doesn't just go rogue and go, all right, that's it, let's shut off our menstruation, or all right, that's it, let's have heavy periods now, or let's start having pain with our cycle. Like the body doesn't do that. It's not this rogue symptom that shows up. There's a reason, like there's something that's happening in the body that's led like a domino effect to that state. And there's probably been, you know, like little whispers all the way along, but we just haven't known really that it's going to lead to something, or we didn't listen, or whatever it was. So so that's important. Restoring insulin to optimal levels, ensuring the blood's balanced, that kind of stuff's really important as well. And then supporting any pain, any individual symptoms that people are having. Yeah, there's so many things to do. I mean, in comparison to kind of like the medical world, where you would go to your doctor and you can get the OCP or you can get metformin, they're kind of like the two things to play with, right? They're just really kind of band-aids on a problem that's just going to come back and the OCP, you know, it's real funny. It's funny with the OCP because we want to fall pregnant at some point, most of us, right? So it's like we're going to have to come off this and deal with the issues. And I just feel like I find it
sort of prolongs it. Prolongs the inevitable. You're going to have to deal with it sometime. You might as well try and deal with it now. And so with the insulin resistance or insulin sensitivity, is that all diet or like supplements, or what's that like to do with?
Insulin resistance, one of the big ones is, let's go to diet. Let's have a look at diet because there's a lot we can do here. When we balance blood sugars, we want to be ensuring, number one, that we're not having coffee before breakfast.
Whoopsie.
Literally was having a coffee before breakfast this morning and I was like, I'm about to go tell everybody not to have a coffee.
Yes.
So I mean, once in a blue moon, not a big deal. But if you're suffering with some of these things, then coffee before breakfast messes about with cortisol and insulin, which is going to kind of create this consistent like disruption for the whole day with the blood sugar. Short time between meals, so like 3, 4, 5 hours kind of max is good, just to keep that constant intake of food and then the balance of the blood sugar between meals. A lot of people will kind of shun sugar and not necessarily sugar, but carbohydrates. Like I see a lot of PCOS women come to me really fearful of carbohydrates. but we also need carbohydrates for a nourishing cycle. So it's like we need to find a really nice balance here. And it's not so much that you need to cut carbs out. Like, don't fear the sweet potatoes and the grains like oats. Like, all of these things are actually really, really good because they've got fiber and they're going to help lower, like, it's a low glycemic load, right? So we're not going to have a spike. We're not going to have a spike in blood sugar as we would if we just had some sugar. So sugar is good to eliminate, especially in the short term. I don't like to pull people off things forever. It's like I try as much as I can to not take things away and try to put things in and just create a bit more balance with what they're doing. But sugars definitely can be quite disruptive, and depending on how gung-ho a client wants to go, like fertility, they'll do whatever. So it's like, all right.
Is that just like processed sugar, or is that like fruit sugar? Like, what sort of sugar?
Fruits are fine, and it comes to the point where, what are you combining this with? So if we're having fruit that are really high in fiber, then that's going to be okay. But it's also going to be like, if you're having a date, can you have it with some nut butter? If you're having a banana, can you put that in a smoothie with some protein? If you do want sugar, can you have it with a handful? Like, if you want some chocky, like, can you have it with nuts in it? So it's like, how can we dull this glycemic response so that we can still have our cake and eat it too? Like,
absolutely.
It's playing with that blood sugar balance. Fiber is a huge one. So I could harp on about fiber all day, and if any of my clients are listening, they're going to be laughing because
I'm a fiber advocate, especially after having kids. I'm in mid-30s, and birth and everything, and it's something that you don't even think about in your 20s. But now it's like, every meal, has it got fiber in it? Yes. Okay. Yes. I'm good.
And like, I worked as a nutrition coach for like 4 years, and I reckon 9 out of 10 people were coming to me eating less than 10 grams of fiber a day. And it's like, for those that are listening, a really good minimum for me is like 28 grams. And then it's like, if you're doing 35 grams, I'm giving you a gold star. Like, that's really great. Fiber intake. And the reason we need fiber is, one, when we're talking about the glycemic response, amazing. It's going to slow the release of food into sugar into the bloodstream. But then we also look at what happens when it gets to the top of the colon, which is soluble fiber, especially. So think of your chia seeds, the way they they're just like, they swell up. Well, they do that in the body too. And what they grab onto is our toxins, our metabolites, hormones that need to be escorted out of the body. And if we're not eating enough fiber, then it's not going to get sucked in and carried out, and it circulates back through. So this is like, number one, if you're not eating enough fiber and you have any of these issues, like, just go eat some more fiber, and it could overthrow half of this for you. It's really baffling. And I think maybe because fiber was always seen as a bit boring, it's like, fiber's so exciting. It's like avocados and raspberries and lentils and beans and almonds. There's so many foods you can get fiber from. It's not just, I got to eat my vegetables. It's like, so that's really, really important. We don't want any of that stuff to be reabsorbed back into the body.
Yeah, absolutely.
A really cool one, which is so simple for people to do, is spearmint tea. I'm not sure, have you heard of this one?
Yeah, a little bit, but please tell me more.
During the follicular phase, when we've kind of got that real high androgen release going on in the theca cells, you can have the spearmint tea, which has an anti-androgenic effect. So it brings androgens down in the body. So it's just a really subtle kind of support. I love herbs that can be used as tea. It's just a really nice way. It's quite nourishing. And what I really love with anything that I give my clients is like, how can I take back my power? How can I take back my control and do this for me? Don't have to rely on all this external stuff to be better. Like, I can take control of things in my own way. So that's kind of like the diet stuff. When it comes to fertility, there's like fertility foods that you can have, like avocados, eggs, figs, like really good omega-3 foods for the inflammation. So salmon, sardines, lots of broccoli. Lots of broccoli. You would know, you've been here before. But it's interesting, like the olives and avocados especially, like they look like especially avocados, they're like a woman with a womb.
That's so true. You look at the foods that are like, and they look like a body part. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
There's a lot of proponent for caloric restriction, but I don't go there. I don't, unless I see it as absolutely necessary. I actually find a lot of people under eating. So
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And that leads to stress, and that like is just that whole cycle. They're anxious about food and they're over exercising, they're stressed, everything's just on heightened alert. So yeah. No, that's really good.
Yeah, and if there's dysregulation with insulin, there's probably going to be dysregulation with leptin and with ghrelin, which are our hunger hormones. So some of these women they don't really feel like eating, so that's what also like disturbs that balance more. And then if you're telling them to eat less, it's like no, you've got to have a bit of a holistic approach here and see what's actually being eaten first. And yeah, I actually haven't had one PCOS client that has been overeating.
Yeah, wow.
So, and that's not to say that there isn't women out there that are, but I just think that it's a big focus even in the literature, and I think it's problematic. I really think it's problematic when it comes to a nourishing menstrual cycle. We need carbs, we need healthy fats, we need like sustenance, especially if we're training. And a lot of women that kind of end up in this PCOS world can be those overtrainers, like they're really pushing them to the limit. If you tell those people to stop eating food, it's like no,
absolutely not. Yeah, I think that's like a stigma as well, like with PCOS, is people get that study and they cherry pick it, that if you lose a certain amount of weight or body fat, then it will help your PCOS symptoms or whatever. But just that stigma around fat phobia is massive with that. So bringing it back to actually just nutrition, like making your nutrition better, and a side effect of that might be fat loss. But that's not the focus. The focus is getting your nutrition good, adding those things in, not taking everything out. Like it's that's such a good holistic approach, which is what women need and what we need more awareness of. So that's great.
And then there's like lifestyle, right? So stress reduction. This isn't just like taking time out and relaxing. This is also, how are you responding to stress? So if you're overreacting to stress, which is what I see a lot, it's like, and you feel it, right? If you think about if you're driving in a car and you have to slam on your brakes and you get this full body reaction. And then
I do that.
That prolonged state of stress it's what we need to regulate. It's like how the body responds to a stressful event. And a lot of us get stuck there, and especially if we're tending to a million and one things, which a lot of women are. So stress, just improving how we respond to stress, and that can be learning how to bring our thoughts back through meditation, breath work, to regulate the nervous system and make us feel really safe and nourished. And
absolutely,
it could be having a chat with a psychologist or a psychotherapist around emotion and all of that. So
road rage is one of my pet peeves, because I do have that heightened fight or flight because I have anxiety as well. So if someone beeps at me or like yells at me, road rage, I really react, and it stresses me out so much. Sometimes my body shakes. I'm like, I have to try and calm myself down and I guess rationalize it, like, no, nothing's wrong, no one's hurting me, like try and talk to my brain, like calm it down. And it's like that, you've got to calm yourself down and find what works for you type to bring your body back down from that like fight or flight stress response. But I guess, is there like a method that you would recommend on de-stressing or responding to stress differently? Just like,
I really like to get pull my clients right back and get them to a point where they don't enter into that space where they're responding to stress in that really overreactive way, because that's horrible. It feels so horrible.
Oh, it's awful.
It really is. And you get stuck there. And then all of a sudden everything's stressful. And it's not that we're not meant to feel stress. We are. Otherwise we would we'd die. We'd do things that are really silly and we'd die.
Stupid, yeah.
We need a stress response, but we also need to be able to regulate and come back to base really quickly. So in the moment, things that can work is actually trying to pull yourself out of your mind. Like, we want to rationalize, we want to talk, but we're not always going to be able to support things in our mind. We kind of need to get into our body and let our body know that we feel safe. So that could even be, where are you feeling this stress? When it arises, like, where are you feeling it? Is it in your chest? Is it in your stomach? Is it, an out of body experience? Like, you've got to just bring yourself back down, like ground your feet on the earth, like touch the part of you that you can actually really feel this happening. And the more that you do that, the more it regulates that sense of safety in your body. So that's something you can practice at any point. I mean, it's tricky when you're driving in the car because you're kind of like, oh, I got to get somewhere. You can't really pull over on the side of the road and like do this. Oh yeah, I'm feeling
it. yeah, definitely. I'm like, sorry, you guys are in a hurry, but I'm stressed.
Meditation, obviously. Like, I love sending people to just do the 10-day basics course on Headspace. It's very like neuroscience based. It helps to rewire neurons. So when your mind does start to go off on a tangent and like run away with a story and start to perpetuate that irrationality, it like, like can suck it back in and be like, oh, I'm here, everything's okay. And so I love that. Like the 10-day course with Headspace is great.
Awesome. I'll have to share that resource with everyone. That is that a free resource? Headspace is a government funded thing, isn't it? Yeah, nice. Yeah, cool. Yeah, I'll share that with everyone. That's a good resource. Yeah, that learning to meditate and that, grounding yourself and stuff. That's cool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, look, how much time do we have?
Keep going. Where are we up to? Stress response. So meditating and stuff like that. So it's so important. And I think like a lot of people these days are like hustle. You've got jobs and kids and you've got to make money and but sometimes it's like really assessing what is it really worth, your health to do all that and just reassessing that and that's what I've done in the last couple of years is outsourcing a lot of my work, and I work less days and less hours because my body just can't handle the amount of, like, I don't have the capacity to do it. Like some people might be able to do 9 to 5 every day and have kids and other things and stuff like that, but I just haven't got that in me. So I just sort of reduce the days and hours so I can, I do have time to focus on my health as well. So is that something you see a lot of with women, is just that overworked, and
this starts coming into the energetic side of things where it's like that balance of masculine and feminine, right? We live in a very masculine world and there is a lot of doing and a lot of hustle, and women have been pushed to act like men in a sense, and some women that come with PCOS, and what I've seen a lot of is they're in male dominant work, like they're working FIFO, or they're doing like they're on the tools, or it's more of this like male dominant role. And then obviously the hustle, the grind, the do, and no time for that space and flow. And I'm just going to downtime. I'm going to be creative, and all of these things. They kind of like they live in the sacral. This is me getting a bit woo-woo, but we have like our sacral chakra, which is the one that's second from the bottom, and this is where like creativity and our sense of self live. And if we're denying ourselves time and we're not like we're ignoring our needs and we're undermining all the things that we need, then that's going to kind of be blocked. If we're not being creative and being in flow with things, even just like I tell my clients, just pick your favorite song and just put it on 4 minutes, 3 minutes, like, and just dance. It doesn't even have to be like, it's not a workout. It's just, how does your body feel, and just let it flow. And we don't do it enough as women, like especially running through our day, like everything's right next to each other. Yeah. Like rams in. Yeah. So then it's like, okay, if you're cooking dinner with the kids, dance to the fridge. Like dance to the fridge, move your body, like shake your hips, like get really intense with that, get in touch with that feminine essence and start to bring some of that into your world, especially if it's like you're in a quite masculine place. And athletes get like this too, right? It's like it's
very focused. Yeah,
and you'll see a lot of athletes who are working at a really high level have more testosterone naturally.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I love all that masculine, feminine, all the energies and all that talk. Like I used to think it was all woo-woo, and I've got a science degree, and I was very like everything's black and white, and if it's not scientific, focus, then I don't want to know about it. And I was very like one-sided. But when I started learning more about naturopathy and just female hormones and everything in general, I was just like, screw that. It actually, women are, we need this stuff. Like we definitely do. And we need to look into things better and not just think about it as the way that men see it, kind of thing. So I love it. It's awesome.
Absolutely. And, especially when it comes to fertility too, and we're talking about that creative essence, it's like, you want to bring a child into this world. Number one, you want to bring a child into this world. Where's your space for it? Energetically, actually space for this child to come into the world, because you're working 9 to 5, you've got 100 things on outside of work, you're running a side hustle, like all of these things. It's like, where is this child actually fit? Some women actually need to step back, and like what you've done over the last couple of years, like that's beautiful. It's like, I actually don't have the capacity for this, and that's okay.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And but that's huge. It could be a huge thing to overcome as a woman. It's like, I can't do it all.
Yeah.
But it's like, more than I can't, it's I don't have to. Like I choose not to.
I choose not to. Yeah, absolutely. And that's another thing, is the acceptance. Like I talk a lot about body acceptance, because that's another thing that women struggle with, is you don't have to let yourself go. You can choose to not hold that as such a high priority and choose to focus on more important things. Doesn't mean that you're not as good a person just because you aren't as fit as you used to be. Like it's not letting yourself go, it's letting yourself like live better in balance, I guess, like, and not be so stressed. Right. Yeah.
And it's really interesting when we talk about the sacral, which is also where our need for control comes from. So if we're in this perpetual need to control, like manipulating macros and have to train like 7 days a week, I have to do intermittent fasting, I have to eat these foods, and then, then I have to do this at this time. The letting go, like what you're saying, it's like, it's not a letting, it is a letting go, but it's in such a self-loving way. And we can move into a space where I'm going to do something because I love myself, and I don't have to exert all this discipline to get there. It's like, not everything's going to unravel.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
That's scary. That's so scary. It's a scary place to be for people.
It is. Yeah. And that's why we're here, I guess, like, is just to open up those doors and open up the minds of women who are stuck in that cycle of in the fitness industry type of thing. But there's so many better ways of doing it out there, and more ways to live balanced and healthy lives without being just under the pump all the time and stressed. But we could talk all day. But I guess one of the main things I've gotten from it is stop drinking my coffee first thing in the morning. And definitely going to check out that Headspace 10-day trial thing. That's really cool, because that stress response is, I think it's pretty common. I don't know if it's just me, but I think it'd be pretty common, and it would affect so many of us. So I'm going to look into that, and learned so much about the brain and hormones and PCOS. It is like such a complex condition. What do you call it? Is it a condition, or is it like if someone was diagnosed with PCOS, they're not, I don't know, they're not sick, they have some symptoms.
They're out of balance. So it's dis-ease. It's like there's no ease. The easefulness has gone somewhere. It's been pushed to the side or wrangled or manipulated in a different way. It's like there's I'm definitely the proponent that you can move through most diagnoses.
Cool.
Anymore.
Yeah. So if you've been diagnosed with PCOS or you think you have it, it's not the end of the world. You're not, you're not stuck. You definitely have lots of options and lots of support. So Claire, if anyone wants to get in contact with you, what's the best way to do that?
I have a website, which is just my name.com.au.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm over on Instagram sharing quite frequently.
Yeah.
And that's, again, just _ my name. So
awesome. Yeah, I'll put the link up for everyone.
I tried Facebook, but it's not my
we can't do everything. No, I think Instagram, most people are on there, or if you're listening to this podcast, we'll have the links in the description so you can check out there and hopefully get in with Claire. I know you're probably booked out, but some opportunities there to talk to you about any issues they might have. And if you've got any more questions about PCOS or anything like that, then let us know and we can chat again maybe.
Thank you so much. That was such a pleasure.
Awesome. Thanks so much. All right.
You're welcome.
Thanks for listening, ladies. I hope you loved it as much as we did. Please screenshot and share and tag us in your stories. We'd absolutely love to see if you are listening and give us any feedback. And also, if you can, we would love you to rate our podcast on your podcast app. Thanks.